Quavo, Takeoff, they was down here with y'all. But they seen you walking by. He's laying on the ground. You got Mike bending down, and they seen you walking by. What took place there?
This the crazy thing about that video, right?
This is a problem, J Prince, and I'm gonna tell you like this: if you're 60 years old and you trying to be a street you failed. You failed. I'm telling you this.
Something heavy just hit the culture, and it's louder than the usual timeline noise. This isn't petty back and forth. It feels like a real fracture that's been building behind closed doors until it finally cracked in public. Mase lit the fuse, dropping word of a private call between J Prince and Takeoff, an angle nobody expected to hear about this late in the story. The reaction was instant. Posts, pressure, and posturing started flying, and the temperature shot up fast. But Mase didn't flinch. He leaned in. For a lot of people, this was the first time someone with real weight stepped forward and said the part most folks only whispered. And because Takeoff's passing still doesn't sit right with the public, everything Mase hinted at landed like a punch.
Hey, man. Yeah, man. We got a little bit straightening going on. You feel me?
There's footage people haven't seen, witnesses who went quiet, and two names that always seem to orbit the conversation: J Prince Jr. and DJ Pat. That's why the streets are locked in, because if this call is what Mase suggests, then we're not just talking about messy PR, we're talking about influence, control, and the kind of behind-the-scenes pressure that can twist an entire narrative. The message from Mase was simple and sharp.
And I'm gonna tell you another thing: when you're dealing with older people, they're the last to know that things have changed. We not your little like the way you talking, I don't get what you mean. We're not your little like, for real.
The old dynamics don't apply. The tone carried that enough is enough energy, and once that switch flips, the internet moves fast, which is exactly what happened. While certain voices tried to calm it down, others doubled the volume, dropping veiled shots, repeating the same stinging line about who was and wasn't there for Takeoff, and daring anyone to challenge it. That's when the backlash surged. Comments turned into threads turned into theories, and suddenly the conversation wasn't about personalities, it was about accountability. Mase hadn't been chasing headlines, he'd been coasting and quiet, playing the long game while the internet argued in circles. That changed the moment he caught those slick subliminals on $1 million worth of game. The tone wasn't friendly, it felt like a nudge meant to put him back in line. That's where the fuse hit the flame. Mase stepped out of the shadows and said exactly what others only hinted at. There was a call.
You wasn't really right there with Takeoff when he was alive. You know what I mean? So,
and the timing wasn't random. According to him, J Prince spoke with Takeoff hours before everything went sideways in Houston. The way Mase framed it, this wasn't a big bro pep talk. It sounded like pressure, loyalty being checked behind the scenes, heat building where the public couldn't see it. He described an energy that didn't feel like a disagreement. It felt like control. Anybody who's been around real tension knows that tone. It's the kind that lingers, the kind that doesn't just end when the phone clicks off. And then the clock lines up with the night everyone remembers, the bowling alley, the dice game, voices rising and chaos cutting through the crowd. The detail that froze people wasn't just that Takeoff was there, it's that the alleged call happened the same night, close enough to make timelines blur and questions multiply. Suddenly what used to be bad timing started to look like a thread. Tug it and the whole sweater might unravel.
All this shit, don't ask me what that.
That's why the podcast jabs hit so hard. You don't throw soft shade when grief still sits heavy. Mase took it personal, not because of ego, but because there's a line you don't cross when a family is still hurting. So he fired back with a sentence that felt like a door slamming. We are not your little. No coded message, no polite translation. It was a reset of the power dynamic in plain language. From that point, the conversation wasn't about whether Mase would respond. It was whether anyone else would stand beside him when he did. And he wasn't standing alone. Camron didn't need to add fireworks. His silence said enough. He sat steady while Mase spoke. No correction, no walk back. That quiet cause Tarn turned a statement into a stance. The moment it landed, the internet felt the shift. If the call is real and if the tone was what Mase says it was, then this isn't just about pride or perception. It's about what was said, when it was said, and what happened after. The spark became a blaze the moment that line about Offset got repeated. You weren't really there for Takeoff. It didn't land like a critique. It landed like a shot at family. Offset responded from the gut. No PR polish, just raw disbelief turned into defiance. And then Cardi stepped forward with him, the way she always does when things get real. She didn't chase clout or speak in riddles. She said what thousands were thinking, this mob ties aura doesn't scare everyone. That's when the temperature shifted for good. One post went viral that summed up the mood. Nobody respects J Prince after Takeoff died on his watch. It wasn't clever or complicated. It just echoed the ache of people who watched a peaceful artist become a hashtag. From there, the crowd started building timelines, circling names and asking the kind of questions that don't fade overnight. Why did the same faces hover around the same tragedies? Why did the loudest speeches always arrive after the damage was done? And if loyalty is the badge, why did that badge vanish when it mattered most? What made the backlash stick wasn't just anger, it was clarity. Fans got tired of eulogies and metaphors. They wanted someone to own the mess, not thread it into poetry. So when Mase said, "We are not your little," it didn't sound like a slogan. It sounded like a line in the concrete. Offset's heart-on-sleeve answer gave it pulse, and Cardi's voice gave it reach. Together, they flipped the script from intimidation to accountability. The court of public opinion opened its doors, and the jury didn't look friendly. But that wasn't the whole story.
And I'm gonna tell you another thing. When you're dealing with older people, they're the last to know that things have changed. We not your little like the way you talking. I don't get what you mean. We're not your little.
The legal headlines didn't calm anything. They did the opposite. When DJ Pat posted a $1 million bond and walked out, the timeline didn't shrug. It started asking who could make that kind of exit move happen so cleanly. Questions turned into theories, and theories turned into a thread that ran straight back to the same circle. It wasn't proof, it was perception. But perception is gasoline when the crowd already smells smoke. Then came the paperwork chatter. Reports surfaced that J Prince Jr. wanted his name removed from DJ Pat's bond condition. To the public, that didn't look like formality, it looked like distance. If everyone stood shoulder to shoulder that night, why draw a line on paper later? Nobody got a simple answer, so people supplied their own. Every move started to look like strategy. The ripples kept spreading. Camron Joshua, known online as Lil Cam, got picked up on an unlawful weapon charge in the immediate aftermath. Even if the charge wasn't the headline people expected, it was enough to keep his name pinned to the board. The pattern talk got louder. Same camp, same night, same cloud of confusion hanging over the detail. And long before that night, the Duke the Jeweler tragedy had already rattled nerve. He flew into Houston, checked in with the right people, played a little dice, and never made it home. The clip where J Prince seemed to tell security to fall back became a point of obsession. Folks replayed it, slowed it down, and treated it like a Rosetta Stone. To them, it felt too neat, too organized, too familiar. That's when the phrase, "there's a pattern," turned from a comment into a chorus. By this point, check-in didn't sound like safety anymore. It sounded like choreography. The idea was supposed to be protection and respect, but when the scoreboard shows loss after loss under the same umbrella, the meaning flips. People didn't want speeches about unity or grief. They wanted to know why the same names kept showing up in the worst moments and why the answers always arrived late, filtered, and wrapped in PR. But that wasn't the whole story. By now, the check-in script didn't feel like protection. It felt like performance. For years, artists were told it meant respect and safety in Houston. But after Duke the Jeweler and then Takeoff, the crowd stopped buying the sales pitch. Mase's "We are not your little" line landed like a clean break from that old code. And Camron's quiet nod made it a stance, not a soundbite. The more people replayed those moments, the more the aura around mob ties looked less like authority and more like pressure. That shift didn't stay on social media. It crept into boardrooms and green rooms, places where silence is strategy. Drake, who the public knows came up through ties with the Prince family, wasn't reposting anything that kept that brand front and center. No shout-outs, no sentimental captions, just distance. And for fans who remember Jazz Prince connecting Drake with Lil Wayne and Young Money, that quiet felt loud. It read like a boundary. The whispers got bigger around Jay-Z too. Word around the industry was that he'd stopped entertaining the "let's make peace" outreach since 2023. He doesn't do comment section drama or public sparring. He just goes cold. That's how billion-dollar brands move when the air around a situation turns into friction. They don't argue, they unplug. To people watching from the outside, it looked like the room clearing out before the lights even flicker. That's the thing about reputations in music, their currency. When controversy turns credible, when it stops feeling like gossip and starts sounding like pattern, corporate partners stop asking who's right. They start asking what's safe. Suddenly, a legacy built on being the calm center of the storm was being recast as the lightning itself. The same OG image that once calmed beef now looked like the center of the chaos. Fans kept connecting back to the same night, the same names, the same unanswered questions. And once the industry starts treating a name like a liability, the change is permanent. Posts disappear, references dry up, invitations get lost. It's not a press release, it's a quiet pivot. The room doesn't shout that it's leaving, you just turn around and realize you're standing alone. But that wasn't the whole story. What kept the conversation alive wasn't just just grief, it was the gap. That night outside 810 Billiards and Bowling, there were dozens of people in earshot when the chaos broke loose. You can hear it in the background of the clips that slipped online, shouts, footsteps, voices breaking. But when it came time to stand up and speak on the record, most of those voices went quiet. To the public, that silence didn't read like caution, it felt like pressure. Rumors spread fast that people were warned off or paid off, or both. Nobody could prove it, but the impression settled like dust. Someone wanted one person to carry the entire weight. That's where DJ Pat's name became a catch-all explanation, too neat for how messy the night looked. Fans started saying the story felt scripted, like the ending had been chosen before the middle made sense. And then the timeline post took on a new edge. If there were more angles and more hardware out that night, why did the public only ever see fragments? Why did the cleanest angles never surface? Theories bred more theories, and every unanswered question turned into a brick in the wall of suspicion. The hardest part to swallow was the idea that Takeoff might not have been the intended target at all. Word online kept tracing back to an argument between Quavo and J Prince Jr., voices raised, tempers up, and Takeoff standing too close to a storm he never asked for. People started calling it a tragedy born from someone else's heat, a warning that spun out, or a flex that went sideways. That framing hurt worse than any headline because it matched what fans knew of Takeoff: quiet, focused, out of the way, never chasing static. Once that possibility lodged in people's minds, the rest of the story bent around it. If he wasn't the one anyone was aiming for, then the whole blame one man and move on narrative felt even thinner. It raised harder questions. Who escalated first? Who tried to pull it back? Who stayed when they should have stepped forward? And why, after all this time, do the clearest answers still live in rumor, while the official story freezes at the same handful of names? That's when the whispers about missing security footage got louder. Folks swore there were cams covering every inch of that block. Front doors, side angles, phones up everywhere. Yet the public conversation kept recycling the same shaky clips. Whether that's because the rest sits in a folder or because it never existed, the effect is the same. Doubt expands to fill the empty spaces. And in those spaces, people began to see a pattern. The same faces near the same scenes, followed by condolences that sounded poetic but never practical. No timelines, no straight talk, just a cycle of grief and distance. All of it fed a single conclusion: if the real story is this fragile, then someone benefits from keeping it that way. Which is why the next rumor landed like a siren, because if one piece of audio actually exists, it could pull the thread that unravels the whole sweater. But that wasn't the whole story. The loudest whisper in the room isn't a post or a clip, it's a file, a phone call that people swear captured J Prince and Takeoff speaking in the final stretch before everything unraveled. Some say it was recorded by accident, the way certain phones auto-log audio when a second line pings in. Others claim it was done on purpose, insurance for a storm everybody could feel coming. Either way, the idea that this audio exists changes the stakes. Screenshots are speculation, and actual voice in real time is sequence. If it surfaces, it won't be commentary, it'll be context. That's why Mase's voice cuts different here. He's not the type to bluff for a headline or throw out bait hoping someone bites. He's one of the few who stood up to bigger machines and outlasted the noise. You can't buy that posture, you earn it by walking away from rooms that once tried to own you. So when he hints at the tone of that alleged call, more pressure than mentorship, more control than counsel, people lean in. They don't have to worship his catalog to respect the fact he doesn't move like a man chasing favor. He moves like a man chasing daylight. Whispers around the file come with details that make the rumor feel heavier. An unmistakable background hum like a studio rack. A muffled holdup that lines up with someone toggling speaker. A second voice off to the side that never takes the lead. Those are the kinds of crumbs the internet turns into bread. Ambient sounds, timestamp clues, the tiny tells that transform a story into a timeline. If the audio really exists and the energy on it matches what's been described, the conversation shifts from who posted what to who said what, when, and why. There's also the question of custody. Word is that Cam and Mase are holding it tight, not out of pettiness, but out of strategy. Once you let the first 10 seconds out, you can't put it back in the bottle. People clip it, crop it, snatch it into lives and spaces, and context gets shredded. So the play, if the file is real, would be to release it whole or not at all. No chopped up bait, no selective leaks, just a clean drop that forces everybody to sit with the same truth at the same time. That's why you keep something like this close, not to dangle it, but to make sure it doesn't get spun into something it isn't. The ripple effects wouldn't stop at blogs. They'd hit boardrooms, courtrooms, and group chats that have stayed discreet for years. Remember, institutions don't care about legends, they care about patterns. Quick bonds, missing angles, witnesses who go quiet, narratives that feel prepackaged. That's the kind of stack that attracts attention from people who read ledgers, not lyrics. If the call confirms pressure, if it sounds like someone trying to box a situation in before it ever hits the street, then the mask slips, and once it slips, it doesn't go back on. Of course, there's a second edge to this blade. If the audio exists and it doesn't match the rumor, if it's calm, respectful, nothing like the pressure talk people expect, then it redraws the map in a different direction. It would force the room to ask who benefited from inflaming the story, and whether grief got exploited to settle old scores. That's the thing thing about proof, it doesn't just confirm a path, it can close one, and the people pushing the darkest version of events know that, which is why they keep insisting the file is the fuse. Light it and you'll see who's telling the truth. But the version that's caught fire is the darker one. The idea that the call doesn't sound like guidance at all. People imagine the pauses, the guarded wording, the kind of long exhale that sits heavy between sentences. They imagine the moment where just checking in turns into a checklist, and they imagine how different the night might have gone if that posture never reached a phone line in the first place. That's why the rumor has teeth, because it lines up with the pattern folks already think they see. There's also the why now question. Why talk about this file at this point, long after the first wave of headlines? Timing mattered. You don't bring a match near a room full of fumes unless you're ready for what burns. The answer some people give is simple. Pressure had to meet pressure. If the other side kept tossing subliminals and rewriting loyalty in public, then dropping the existence of a recording even as a hint rebalanced the table. It tells the room you're not playing telephone with grief. You're sitting on something that can't be dismissed with a caption. And if a leak ever happens, it won't be tidy. It never is. Somebody will upload 30 seconds to a burner, then someone else will post the full minute in 42. Spaces will pop, live breakdowns will start, and people will rewind every syllable like they're decoding court exhibits. Editors will strip noise, hunt for room tone, and argue over whether a faint click proves a handoff. That's how the internet litigates truth now, out loud in real time with millions of jurors who don't need permission to deliberate. Which brings it back to the word that scares power more than outrage: sequence. If the file marks time, if you can place the call against known posts, rides, arrivals, exits, then it doesn't matter how many prayers up captions showed up afterward. The story locks in, and when a story locks in, reputations don't fall because the internet got angry. They fall because the timeline finally refuses to bend. It's wild that an empire's stability could hinge on a single conversation, but history says it happens exactly like this. One voice memo that won't stay buried, one sentence that reframes a night everybody thought they understood. If it confirms pressure instead of peace, then it won't just rattle a brand. It will make people reevaluate every moment that came after the posts, the distancing, the sudden quiet from people who used to speak loudly. And if it clears the smoke instead, then the culture will have to sit with a different discomfort. How easy it is to stack pain, rumor, and silence into a verdict. Either way, the file, real or not, already has power because it's forced everybody to consider what accountability looks like before a court date and after a eulogy. It's made the room ask whether fear is still the loudest voice in Houston, or whether that spell finally snapped the moment someone said, "We are not your little and minute." By now, the shine on the untouchable OG image is gone. What's left is a spotlight that won't move, trained on unanswered questions, and a family that still doesn't have clean closure. The distance from famous friends, the quiet unfollows, the vanishing shoutouts, none of it screams guilt by itself, but together it paints a picture of rooms going cold and phones that stop ringing. In this culture, reputation isn't decoration, it's infrastructure. When the public starts treating your name like a warning label, deals dry up long before the headlines do. What pushed things over the edge wasn't a single post or podcast moment, it was accumulation. The timeline doesn't forget the dice game, the argument, the confusion, the $1 million bond, the paperwork chatter, the witnesses who didn't speak, and the recording people swear is sitting in a vault. Each piece on its own raises eyebrows. Stack them and you get a story that feels too heavy to be coincidence. That's why Mase's decision to speak landed with aftershocks. He didn't dress it up. He just said the part everyone else avoided and forced the room to face it. Meanwhile, the check-in myth collapsed in real time. If protection doesn't protect, it's not protection, it's pageantry. Fans said it out loud. Artists whispered it in private, and the boardrooms did what boardrooms always do when the air gets thin. They shifted away without ceremony. The old rules cracked because they depended on fear and silence. Once those started fading, the system that leaned on them began to wobble. No press release can reverse that. No caption can glue it back. At the center of all this noise is a quiet man who didn't look for trouble and didn't live online. Takeoff wasn't built on beat. He was craft, timing, and precision. The pain is sharper because it's misaligned. Nothing about his energy suggests he should be a headline shaped like this. People aren't asking for revenge. They're asking to breathe without question mark. They want the footage that fills the gaps, the voices that finish their sentences, and the names that stop hiding behind euphemisms and poetry. Grief is the price of love isn't enough when the bill keeps rising and the receipt won't print. If that rumored call ever plays in public, the conversation won't be about clout. It'll be about sequence. Who called, who pressed, who ignored the storm gathering at the edge of a bowling alley sidewalk. And if it confirms the pressure people suspect, then the dominoes don't just tip, they crash. Labels distance, partners evaporate, friends turn into acquaintances overnight. That's not drama, that's gravity. Empires don't fall because the internet got mad. They fall because the fear that propped them up finally disappeared. That's the real shift happening right now. Fear is fading, silence is cracking, and the culture is remembering what its voice can do when it stops waiting for permission. Maybe it took one person with nothing to gain to say, "We are not your little for the spell to break." Maybe it took a family's grief becoming a community's mission state. Either Either way, the room feels different now. People are watching more closely, talking more clearly, and refusing to be dazzled by proximity to power. So the drum beat stays the same. Justice for Takeoff, not rumors for sport, not pain for views. Answers, the kind you can stand on without squinting. Until then, every move will be analyzed, every caption archived, every timeline updated the second something shifts. Because this didn't start with a trend, it started with a life. And when the truth finally lands, whether whispered on a file or spoken in a courtroom, it won't just close a chapter. It'll redraw the map of who really holds power in this culture and what it costs to keep it.